All right, so big fight coming up this weekend. Fight we've been waiting for. I think one of the like it's on the radar, but I don't think it's getting enough noise. David Benavidez versus David Morrell. I think this fight's happening at light heavyweight at 175, right? And this is a fight that people have been talking about for some time because it was kind of brewing, but then it seemed like it wasn't realistic. But now it's here. We've seen the pressers, we've seen the animosity. I'm reading the comments online. People are talking crazy. So, what do you think about this fight? Are you excited for this fight?
I am excited for the fight. These two guys clearly don't necessarily really like each other. I mean, not to the point where, they want to just stab each other, right, at the press conference, right? But they clearly don't like each other, right, which makes for an exciting fight. Stylistically, they're both great fighters. But ultimately, I do think we both will choose one fighter over the other. I think there's a clear favorite here, but still can't count the other fighter out. Don't want to get into predictions right now, but to answer your question just straight out, I'm excited for the fight, and I would like to see how the fight ends for sure, because it's going to be fireworks.
Yeah. What's interesting about this fight is, both these guys were campaigning at 168. They were big guys. They were considered big guys for 168. Now they're at 175. But when I look online and I look in the comments, I see David Benavidez getting more flack. People are like, oh, you're a heavyweight, shrinking up to do this. But David Morrell is as big, if not bigger, than David Benavidez. Now, his physique's a bit different. He's a bit more muscular. David Benavidez obviously used to be very heavy, and now he's gotten in shape. So he looks a little more flabby, but height-wise, comparable. I would imagine they blow up to similar weights, but their size is very, very comparable. But so why do you think people are giving David Benavidez more flack, saying, oh, you're a weight bully, when he's fighting another guy who I think, if you're going to call him a weight bully, could be considered a weight bully as well?
I think it's just coming from, it's just the after effects of 168, with David Benavidez typically weighing in a lot heavier than his opponents. I do think compared to the heavyweight division, the more pounds you put on the heavyweight division means less when you're moving a lot higher in weight versus in the lower weight classes. Each pound means a lot more. That's why there's so many different weight classes when you start going in the lower weights. 168 is on the upper echelon in terms of weight classes, but still those 15 pounds, you hear hydrate back up to 15, 20 pounds from 168. That's a big difference, compared to, Andres, or Caleb Plant, or even the likes of like Canelo, right? So he's usually a lot bigger. So I think people are taking those instances and they're just kind of applying it to this instance, not realizing he's fighting an opponent this time that is actually his size, might be arguably even stronger than he is. Probably got bigger. He's probably a bigger puncher than Benavidez is, right? So for me, I think is irrelevant at this point at 175, right? But that's the reason I think people are bringing it up, So
yeah. I think it's the Canelo stuff. I think it's mostly the Canelo fans who are just like, oh, you're so big, why you want to fight Canelo, this and the third. So I think they're just giving him a lot of flack. They'll continue to give him a lot of flack. I think this case they're actually on Morrell's side, even though Morrell was kind of chasing Canelo, obviously for not as long. But so I think they're on Morrell's side. Like, yeah, this and the third. They're hoping Morrell beats Benavidez, But I think it's interesting. Like I said, two guys who are usually larger than their opponent are now going to fight one another, and it's like, who's going to have the advantage there? You know what I mean? Who's going to be able to impose their will when you're very comparable in size, height, and weight? I can't imagine Morrell, after he's hydrating, is coming to any less than 185, bro. I think even more.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, definitely not. I don't see that happening.
So, but now both these guys campaigned at 175 for their last fight. And people can say lackluster performances, but I think they clearly won those fights, right? It just wasn't stoppages. And just because it's not a stoppage doesn't necessarily mean it's a lackluster performance. But I will say this. I saw holes in both of their games in the last fight at 175. So do you think 175 is making a difference, or do you think it's just their opponent, or you just think, hey, you can't stop everybody?
No, it's clearly the weight class. Absolutely. The weight class definitely matters. Even if you move up one weight class, that's is still a difference, especially up there, because 168, 175, that's 7 pounds, right? And then your opponents is used to that weight class. So, they definitely did it. And I think what really stood out is they both kind of gassed out, didn't have as much energy, right? Because the added weight affected their performances in the later rounds. I would say Morrell looked worse than David Benavidez did, at least. And I think David Benavidez fought a better comp in comparison to David Morrell, right? Which I got to give him credit for. But yeah, I definitely think it's definitely the weight class, because that plays a big difference. And this is not something that we've never seen before. We've seen fighters move up and they don't really look as good until they get acclimated with the weight class. So that's just, what do you think? Do you think it's the weight class, or do you think it was really more so the opponents, or maybe something stylistically?
I think for David Benavidez, it was the weight class. I think for both of them it's weight class in some aspect, but I mean in terms of how it impacted David, I think we saw him slow down like earlier than we've seen. Like you said, you start to see a bit of that fatigue of carrying the extra weight. So I think that impacted him. Now, in Morrell's case, I think we saw a bigger guy was more equipped to handle his punches than what we've previously seen. So I think the weight class affected both of them on different ends of the spectrum, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and I mean, they both won those fights. David Benavidez, I think, won the fight more clear because I think Morrell started losing some of those later rounds. And you started seeing a bit of frustration. And that kind of leads me into my next point of him now. Now, these two matched up versus one another. Forget the other guys they fought at 175, but matched up with one another. Now, when these guys line up, like, what are we expecting to see here? Do you think we're going to see all-out fireworks, or do you think we're going to see more of a strategic fight in there, both guys knowing the danger of the other guy?
I think in the initial rounds is them going to be, they're going to be filling each other out, right? But I do think we're probably going to get action a bit quicker compared to most other fights. I think round 4 is where we'll probably start to see them start letting their hands go. We start to see Benavidez kind of like, maybe open up at times, throwing flurries, throwing certain combinations. David Morrell's probably going to use more of his footwork, try to land a couple punches, right? Because that's really how his style is. He'll throw combinations, but not in sequential, or it's not as much as compared to David Benavidez. I think he's going to look to try to hurt David Benavidez probably early, but I think it's going to be a fill-out round, first 3 rounds. Then it's going to start picking up between 4 and 7, really. And then after that, we're going to see someone run away with the fight, especially in the later rounds. That's why I see kind of things going. I feel like the first 3 rounds, right, or really more so 4 and 7, we'll see how much of an impact. I would say from 3 to 6, we'll see how much of an impact, or who's going to kind of look to impose themselves more from a physical standpoint, right? We'll see exactly how strong Morrell is in comparison to David Benavidez, right? And it may be a situation where we see with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia in the sense of, now that you fought someone your size, now this can probably make or break you, So I am curious to really see that. But I think, I see the progression of the fight kind of just going, 2 guys really showing their style. And I feel like one thing that's kind of on both ends, I feel like Morrell really is going to have to be careful with his gas tank and not getting overwhelmed by David Benavidez. But I feel like Benavidez is also going to have to be careful because you throw a lot of combinations, especially in the pocket, you open yourself up to getting hit, right? And I feel like with Morrell and his punching power, especially with some of that Cuban style of going in and out and punching from different angles, he could probably hurt David Benavidez, if I'm being honest, right? So Benavidez is definitely going to have to be on the lookout for that, So, but that's just kind of like just a quick assessment without going too deep into it.
So before we get into predictions, I want to ask this. Do you see 2 things? Do you see the fight going the distance, one being stopped, or just hitting the canvas in this fight?
I can see both. I can literally see both happening. I can see Morrell dropping Benavidez, right? But I think that is less likely to happen in the sense of, in comparison to Benavidez stopping Morrell in the late rounds, right? Just drowning him and then just stopping him. Not saying Morrell, isn't in shape, but I feel like his gas tank doesn't compare to David Benavidez, right? And if David Benavidez is saying what he's saying compares to his last fight where he was injured, he had like a broken I think he had something was broken in the fight against in the 175 fight, you
It's
know,
supposed
and
to
he's
be,
fully healthy now. You know, if what he's saying is true and he's more prepared in this fight, I don't see how Morrell could weather the storm in the later rounds. You know,
okay.
so
So so so
that's kind of
so you lean towards Benavidez in this fight.
yeah. Benavidez, like the likelihood I think that Benavidez stopping Morrell is higher than Morrell dropping Benavidez, but it's kind of like a 60-40 kind of situation, you know, because I could see
Mhm.
Morrell dropping Benavidez. What do you think? What is your percentages? If you
I don't think we're gonna see someone hit the canvas this fight. I actually think it's gonna go with the distance. Even though I mean I would love to see a firefight, right? But I think it's gonna go the distance. I think Morrell, what we've been seeing from Morrell is he's just been a lot bigger, a lot stronger than guys, and he comes from that Cuban school of boxing. But you know, being with Ronnie Shields and being in the pros, and just being so much better than the guys he's been fighting. I don't think we've been seeing him employ that much of that Cuban style of boxing. It's a lot of just walk you down, just bang on you and stop you pretty early. I think we're going to see him use more of the footwork, more of, like you said, the in and out style, the Cuban style, because I think David Benavidez had been progressively getting better, and the experience that he's been having has really been helping. Right, I think the Caleb Plant was major, fighting someone as swift as that came out with such a big lead against you, right, and you had to be poised and really fight your way back into that. You know, then the Boo Boo Andre fighting against someone who was throwing so many different looks against you, right? It was different than the Caleb Plant. Yeah, Caleb was like, you know, really pure boxing, but Boo Boo came out and he was shots to the head, shots to the body, you know, right hand, left hand, you know. So it was just, you know, the way Boo Boo came out, bro. I'm like, oh, we got a fight on our hands. But Benavidez quickly adjusted, right? He started taking things away from Boo Boo, and then he started imposing his will on Boo Boo, and quickly we saw that fight ended, right? I just think in this fight, I'm gonna lean with Benavidez. I think he has too much experience. And this is something we've spoken about over the years as we discussed this fight. These guys are only like a year apart. Benavidez is like a year and maybe some months older, you know, but he has so much more experience, and he has more big fight experience. He's fought against more adversity, and I think that's going to be the difference in this fight. When things get a little bit tight and someone has to weather the storm, he's done it before. Morrell hasn't
Yep.
had to do it before. Yes, I think Morrell has that big punch. I think Morrell is really good. I think he's still going to have a great career after this. I do think he's going to lose this fight, but I think we're going to see moments of David pressure him and overwhelming him. If Benavidez was to get a stoppage, it would be a TKO where he landed too many
Yes.
consecutive hits without anything coming back. I don't think he's going to knock Morrell out, like put him to
Yeah.
sleep. But
I think it'll because Benavidez don't have the power to be. Yeah, all his stoppages are kind of pretty similar. Outside of what happened early in his career, is just drowning you and TKOing you. Really.
yeah, so but I do think he's going to outbox him. I think he's going to be harder to be hit than Morrell thinks, right? And we see when Morrell had some issues hitting what's the guy's? I think his nickname was Hot Rod. I forgot his name in the last fight though. We seen some frustration, and I think we can see some frustration again as Benavidez is going to be a little bit harder to hit. As Benavidez has been progressing, you know, he's added like so. No, he's not necessarily amazing head movement, right? But he's keeping the hand high. He's getting out of range. His defense has been getting better, right? He's not just staying there to get hit. So, and what I saw from Morrell the last fight is when he couldn't hit, you know, when he couldn't land, he got frustrated, and I didn't see him employ any creativity to switch that up. And I think that's going to be his downfall in this fight. I got David Benavidez by unanimous decision.
Yeah, I got Dave Benavidez by TKO, 11th
TKO.
round.
You said ninth?
11th.
Oh, 11th. Okay. So we're on the same page here. So we got David Benavidez. A quick fight I want to shout out on the undercard. My man Stephen Fulton. Stephen Fulton's fighting Brandon Figueroa. This is a rematch. They fought previously, but now they're fighting at 126. This time, Fulton is the underdog. Do you think Fulton can pull this off, or do you think he's going to lose this fight?
I think he can pull it off. Absolutely. I think, you know, given Fulton's track record, beating undefeated fighters, getting it out the mud, really having not necessarily the typical groomed career that a lot of fighters have at the top, where they're, you know, putting them in there with a lot of journeymen, especially in that little mid phase to high phase, you know. I think people just forget who Fulton is, especially with this loss against Inoue the Monster, right? Inoue is just a special talent, a special animal. Doesn't mean, you know, he's gonna go out and just lose to, you know, Brandon Figueroa. He beat him the first time in a close fight, but this is a different weight class, and I feel like, you know, he got whatever it takes to beat him again. You know, I don't think from what I've watched or what I've seen from Brandon Figueroa, he hasn't necessarily improved drastically for me to be like, you know what, Fulton, you're definitely going to lose this fight, right? I would say it's going to be a tougher fight because they're up in weight classes, and, you know, the added weight makes a difference, you know? Stamina, punching power, the accumulation of punches, right? But I do think Stephen Fulton, you know, also has added more, and I think that experience, even though he got stopped pretty early on against Inoue, I feel like it exuded some level of confidence, at least going into, you know, the Brandon Figueroa fight. And given from his last fight, I feel like he's going to make adjustments because that last fight didn't really look too good for him. So I think he's going to bounce back and really train harder. I would hope so, you know, but that's just my assessment.
Yeah. So, I mean, I really can't say anything different than what you said. You know, Brandon Figueroa is more acclimated to the weight class. He's been fighting there longer, but I am leaning Fulton in this. I think Fulton may be by a split decision. Tough fight. I think it's going to be a tough fight. The last fight was a tough fight, but I'm leaning Fulton for the win here. But I'm very interested in seeing that one because I think this is a pivotal moment in Stephen Fulton's career. So I'm really interested to see what the performance is like. Does he get the W? But yeah, I'm gonna lean Stephen Fulton. I'm gonna go split decision win there. So interesting. Like I said, that's just one fight I want to shout out on the card, but definitely want to hear from you guys in the comment section. Who you got this weekend? Is it Benavidez? Is it Morrell? How do you see the fight ending? Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. 2 cents short of $1, and we're out.